Hey friends, welcome back. Let's chat about the 8 books that I read in the month of March. In January and February, I think my reading was much more fruitful. I had a couple of winners this month in March that I'm excited to talk to you about, but all in all, March really took a dip in terms of stats and just enjoyment of life and reading in general. Before we get into all 8 of these titles though, I want to thank today's sponsor, which is Book of the Month. If you don't know what Book of the Month is by now, I don't know where you've been, but it is a wonderful monthly book subscription service that brings us readers 5 to 7 new and early release titles that are available for that coming month, which personally for me, I have found so many titles that I probably wouldn't have found if it weren't for Book of the Month. So having them do all of the legwork and curating that list of books to choose from really helps me discover new titles, new authors, and it's just so much fun every single month seeing what the choices are, being able to choose your book, and then having it show up in that cute little blue box every single month. Every month there are really great choices, but this month they were packed. The 2 that I chose, which I am so excited about both of them, are Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez, as well as How to End a Love Story by Yulin Kwong. A little bit of romance action happening here. Just for the Summer I'm really excited about because I've loved pretty much everything that I've read by Abby Jimenez. I think she's a wonderful storyteller and I just fall for her characters every single time. And now a new to me author is Yulin Kwong's How to End a Love Story. I'm really excited for the story itself, but also what propelled me forward to choosing this one was the fact that this author is the adapting screenwriter for Emily Henry's People We Meet on Vacation, as well as the writer-director for Beach Read when it comes out too. If Emily Henry trusts her, I trust her. And I just can't wait to try it out. If you're not a romance girly, fear not. There are so many other genres that you can choose from every single month. And if you click the link in my description and use the code PASTEL at checkout, you'll get your first box for $5. A quality hardcover book for $5. What a time to be alive. Not to mention, they also have audiobooks that you can choose from as well. And we all know how I love an audiobook, so you can use your credit however you want. And to use that credit, don't forget to click the link down below and use the code PASTEL at checkout. Thank you so much to Book of the Month for sponsoring today's video, and let's get into the wrap up. The first book, not in order, this isn't the first book, one book that I read in the month of March is The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman. I was really excited about this title because ever since I read Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone by Benjamin Stevenson, I can just sense that I'm emerging into a murder mystery sort of style era. And this one did not disappoint. This is so much fun. It's following 2 older women and 2 older men who live in this sort of retirement village. And they meet every Thursday in the puzzle room and they discuss murder mysteries and they try to solve them. And then in this story, they get a real life murder mystery happening within their community. So they're trying to solve it. And some of the characters have connections from their past lives. We're getting a little bit of the police detective side of the story as well. And it is just so much fun. The voices that Richard Osman is able to write in for these characters is just stellar. I don't know what it is, but he can write in a old woman's voice perfectly. I ate this up. This was a 4.5-star read for me. I also read Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Eames. I just will never get over the fact that the tagline of this book is "The boys are back in town." I think it's so hilarious and so apt for this story. It's following a group of old mercenaries where they used to be in a band together. They're older, their bodies don't really work as good as they used to, but one of our friend's daughter, who has kind of begun her own band, sort of, is in trouble. And they need to get the boys back together for one last mission to go help save her. It was just such a fun time. This writing style is definitely not super serious. There's humor, there's sarcasm, there's banter, and our main characters are just a mix of every type of person. And I don't know if this is gonna make sense because obviously it's a fantasy story, but there were some plot points that I felt I had to have a suspension of disbelief in a way, mostly because it felt a couple things could have been figured out before they went on their mission, and or things came a little bit easy for the main characters in some ways. But I would read this book again. I really think I would. And I don't say that about a lot of books. Normally if I finish it and I like it, it doesn't really come into my mind that, oh, I'd like to read that again. It doesn't happen often. And I have thought about that multiple times with this book. So definitely will be keeping this on my shelf because I could see a reread for just a silly, goofy time in the future. I ended up giving this one a happy 4 stars. Not so happy, but I did read Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner. If you didn't know, she is the lead singer for Japanese Breakfast, and I love her music, love her band. This is her memoir. It is very sad and incredibly written. I predominantly listened to this on audio because she narrates it and it was available on Libby. And like I said, it's a memoir, so she talks about her life and losing her mother to cancer and just sort of her her coming up in the music industry and the complicated relationships that she has been through with her mother and just other people in general. My favorite thing about this book was how she kept relating things back to food. I haven't read a ton of memoirs or a ton of nonfiction for that matter, but I do feel like it was a very well-rounded story because there were themes that kept getting brought up, and I would venture to think that not every memoir or not every nonfiction kind of has something like that. And I obviously say that very loosely because I am not an expert in nonfiction, but I felt like it was just structured very well. And I think that you should check out the audiobook for sure. I think it's very worthwhile and I loved it. I give this one 5 stars. Was that my only 5-star of the whole month? Wow, sure was. Like, I loved both of these books too. We're starting off strong with my 3 favorites, I think. Accidentally, didn't plan that, but yeah, like all 3 of these so far would recommend. But yeah, this was the only 5-star. Interesting. Next, I read Everyone on This Train is a Suspect by Benjamin Stevenson. This was the continuation, the next book in the series that this author has. The previous one being the Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone. This time, he's taking a train to this like author convention sort of panel thing because he's gotten some attention for his first book, because in this world, the narrator, who is Ernest Cunningham, is the author of the first book and is now also the author of this book. So it's like a tongue-in-cheek sort of, I don't know what sort of style that would be considered, but we're following him as he's writing this book and uncovering the mystery. And just like in the first book, the writing style is very humorous. It's very much like breaking the fourth wall and talking to us about what's going on. And just like the first one, I had a great time. It was a lot of fun. I liked the writing style. The audiobook was super fun. And I don't want to compare this book to the first book too much, but it's kind of hard not to when it's some of the same characters and very similar writing styles and ways of telling the murder mystery. I just liked the first one better. I feel like the first one had more twists and turns and it was just a lot longer, so I had more time to like stew in the mystery. This one was just a little bit quicker. There's nothing overtly that I didn't like. Obviously, there are some like far-fetched things that go on in this book, and I'm not going to talk about them because that would be a spoiler. And I think some of those occurrences were like very hard for me to like actually believe that something like that would ever happen in real life, even though that's might be the point that this is literally just for fun and it is a little bit absurd, which is great. It still took me out of the story just a little bit. I ended up giving this one a solid 4-star because I still had a great time. Next, I read a little poetry collection called Series Concerns by Wendy Cope. 2 of my patrons, Chris and Claire, sent me this off my wish list, so thank you again. I had a great time with this. I really enjoyed it. I talked about it a little bit in one of my recent vlogs, but I just really like that Wendy Cope is a poet that talks about some serious topics, but also has like a lot of like silly poems in here. And a lot of them do involve rhyming. And I think in a lot of like contemporary poetry, not a whole ton of it rhymes. It's more like spoken word or like stream of consciousness sort of style, which is how I write poetry. Like it's more stream of consciousness and just kind of like whatever happens, happens. But I do love a good old rhyming poem. It just brings me back to like why I enjoyed poetry in the first place growing up. It's just fun. I really liked so many of these poems. So I read it. I enjoyed it. I don't really write poetry collections though. I more so just give you like would recommend or wouldn't recommend. And I think I would recommend this one. I liked it. These next 3 might be a touch difficult to get through. This first one is Ripe by Sarah Rose Etter. This was a mood read. Wasn't planning on reading it this month. March was a pretty rough month, like mentally and just like health-wise. I also got very sick. If you didn't hear me already say this in my last video, I got really sick last month and was down for the count with whatever stomach flu bug that was going around. And I think I read this like right before I got sick. I just like wasn't feeling well up here. And for me, it was like when I'm sad, I want to listen to sad music. I don't want to listen to happy music. So when I wasn't feeling great up here, I was like, oh, maybe I would love a like more serious sort of like contemporary book, which is why I picked this book up, and I should not have. First and foremost, the book is written beautifully. It's about a main character who is living in Silicon Valley, doing this like tech job that she doesn't necessarily enjoy. She doesn't really enjoy life at all. She's very depressed. She has the most bleak outlook on life that I have ever read. And just simply put, this book has like 0 hope. Know going into this book that it has a lot of trigger warnings. There's pregnancy, drug use, alcohol use, suicide, suicidal ideation, just like lack of caring for oneself in every way. It was a brutal story to read and listen to through audio, and I really loved it. Like, it was hard. It was a difficult read, but like, it was written so well. It was really good, but it's not one that I would necessarily recommend. I wouldn't recommend this book to really anyone, but if you are okay with those trigger warnings, or you are someone who find that when books talk about these types of things that you feel more seen, then maybe you should pick this up. It's, a lot. So be kind to yourself. If you are someone who doesn't like or is unsure about reading about those things because of like a fragile mental space that you have at the moment, please don't pick this up. Don't read this book. But I ended up giving this like a 4 or 4.5 stars. I haven't really stopped thinking about it. All right, these last 2 books, we have Heaven and Earth Grocery Store by James McBride and The Book That Wouldn't Burn by Mark Lawrence. Very quickly, I'm gonna go into Heaven and Earth Grocery Store. I ended up DNFing this book. I'm very upset, but after I decided to DNF it, I felt like a huge weight lifted off my shoulders. This book doesn't make entire sense as to why I didn't love it, because I think that at my core, I am like a character-driven person, because that's all this is. This is like just characters. The book is set up, even in the synopsis, you learn that they uncover a human skeleton within this community called Chicken Hill. And within Chicken Hill, there is the Jewish and the Black communities, and they mostly live in harmony. But like I said, they found this human skeleton, and that's presented within the first chapter. But then after that, it hasn't come up a single time since. We get glimpses of like what could have happened, like who that person actually was, but it's very much like just a second thought within this book. After the first chapter, we're literally just following so many different characters, and it's mostly just a story of all of these different characters that live within Chicken Hill, and sort of the like wide variety and chaoticness of all of it. Now, I prefaced all of that by saying that I think that I am mostly a character-driven person. So on the surface level, this really should be a book that I would enjoy, but I think at the same time, there has to be compelling plot, or I just don't find myself caring about every character that's presented to me. And that's exactly what happened with this book. There was just nothing happening. Nothing was moving the story forward. We were just getting character after character, and sometimes we would see how other people relate to other characters that we've already met. But for the most part, I just was really struggling to even want to pick this book up. I felt myself falling into a reading slump. This was the book that carried over from February, so I was making it my first read of March, and this was not the mood that I was trying to bring forth through the rest of the month, and it was really bringing me down not being able to like get into the book at all. So I ended up DNFing this one. One thing I do want to mention is that the writing was beautiful. There would be random quotable lines that I really did enjoy. Like, I think that James McBride is a talented writer, but the storytelling in this one was very difficult for me to read. So I ended up DNFing it at around 75% or so, and after I decided to not finish the book, I felt like a weight lifted off my shoulders. I couldn't. Ending on a poor note, I read The Book That Wouldn't Burn by Mark Lawrence. Not to overuse a quote that I've said in the past, but this is the book that wouldn't end for me. And it has very complicated emotions for me as well. This was my book club pick, and we had a live show discussion for it within my book club. It was a mixed bag. Some people really loved it. Some people kind of felt the same way that I did, and that is the following. I would compare this book to The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. Now, Starless Sea, one of my favorite books of all time. Very similarly between the two, I feel like it is a very much like vibey atmosphere, sort of have to just keep going along with it, and eventually it will kind of make sense. That worked so well for me in The Starless Sea, because the writing style was like the epitome, the top tier of lyrical, poetic, a little bit pretentious. It was so stunning. And the difference is that Mark Lawrence doesn't write like that. So the whole time, it was literally, I'm not kidding you, 400 pages until I was sort of understanding what was going on within this world. So 400 pages, it was such a roller coaster, because there would be little moments where I'd be really interested, and then he would just completely leave that train of thought or leave that character's point of view, and then I would be left to fend for myself again. It just got really bright, and I just punched you. I'm so sorry. So my point of bringing up the comparison is that even though I didn't really understand the whole time what was going on within The Starless Sea, I was still loving that journey, loving that writing. And with this, I was just getting so frustrated. I don't like feeling stupid, and this book made me feel stupid. So my enjoyment of this book was not very great, but I will now counter that, because there are things that Mark Lawrence did really well within this story, but most of it happened for me within the last like 150 pages. And honestly, this is too much of a book to read to have to get to the good bits of it, you know? Like there was so much building, but I still couldn't tell you what he built. It was just so confusing. Things by the end of the story did get sort of tied up and we got a lot of answers, but again, I think it took way too long to get as many answers as we did. There was hardly any kernels of information that actually made sense in the first half. And I know it's an unpopular opinion. This book is widely loved. On Goodreads, it has vastly 4 and 5 star reviews. And it's like, I understand why people could like this. I just hated my experience with it. I liked the story and I liked the world, but I hated how he told the story and built and described the world. I don't know if Mark Lawrence is my guy. That could very well just be the case. Right now, I don't plan on continuing the series, but also maybe you'll see me reading the new one on release day and you can all mind your own business. I don't think that'll happen, but if it does, leave me alone. This was the most frustrating thing that I've read in a while. I'm giving it a 3-star rating. Depending on what aspects I think about, it lowers it to like a 2.5 all the way to like a 3.5. Okay, this book is a mixed bag for me. I am so frustrated by it. Let me know down below if you've read any of these titles or if you are now interested or not interested in any of these titles. Or if you don't know what else to say, then leave me the sloth emoji down below in the comments. Thank you so much to Book of the Month for sponsoring today's video. Don't forget to check out the link down below in the description and use the code PASTEL to get your first box for $5. While you're down there, please do subscribe and like the video. I always appreciate your support. And of course, be kind to one another and happy reading. Bye.